Hi, welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm Steve Richardson, a bankruptcy attorney trying to keep people on their path to financial stability and independence through education. According to the authors of the book The Millionaire Next Door, self-employed people make up less than 20% of the workers in America, but account for 2/3 of the millionaires. So for those who want financial freedom on the millionaire level, being their own boss is something that should at least be looked into. But starting a business isn't easy, and most of them fail within the first 3 years. This has some people thinking about owning a franchise instead. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talked to Giuseppe Grammatico about the franchise model and whether it's right for you. My guest today is Giuseppe Grammatico, an entrepreneur, author, business coach, and host of the Franchise Freedom Podcast. In 2005, after experiencing multiple mergers and layoffs in the financial services sector, he left the corporate world and ventured into entrepreneurship. He bought a franchise, became a master franchisee, and then a master franchisor. In the past few decades, he's spent working in every conceivable area of the franchising industry. Welcome to the show, Giuseppe.
Thanks, Steve. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for the invite. Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of folks out there who have are employed working for someone else, but they have what's often described as the entrepreneurial itch.
The itch.
Yeah, and they want to scratch it.
Yeah.
And they've always wanted to be their own boss, have their own business, and build something for themselves. But as you know, and we both know, as business owners, starting and running a business comes with risks, as most businesses do fail. But there's nothing all that safe and unrisky about being an employee, is there? I understand that you talk to folks about some of the risks and realities of being an employee these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if you have that itch, scratch it because you only live once, as I jokingly say. But yeah, I mean, I have conversations daily, and the topic of risk in owning a business comes up, and I don't know if I want to take that amount of risk. It just becomes a bigger thing than they can even imagine. And with risk, I go, there's absolutely risk, franchise, non-franchise business, even being an employee. And part of that has to do with on the employee side is that you can get laid off at any point in time. I went through 3 mergers. You see it in the tech space amongst others, and really there's no such thing as a safe job. So you get laid off, and they give you maybe a little bit of severance, you collect a little unemployment, and now what do you do? So a big part of having a job too is one income stream, right? You get your W-2 salary, which is going to be taxed at the max. And then, I always say blindly invest in a retirement plan that we have no control over as well.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, a couple mutual funds, or you can select from a couple mutual funds. So why not? And by the way, a franchise or business has risks as well. There's an investment. There's no guarantee of success. So why not? I always throw the idea of kind of creating a safety net for yourself, and while have your W-2 job, create a business on the side, something that could generate income. So therefore you're diversifying your streams of income, and you're creating that safety net in the event you were to potentially lose your job.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there's always that risk of failure, as I said. And I don't know whether you've heard of business coach John Paul Mendoza, but he wrote a book titled Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes them 3 years to find out.
I like
and
that.
a lot of the book has to do with positioning and things like that, but you really don't, what you may think is a great idea and you're going to start this business, if you don't really research out a lot of the details, what your product's going to be, what your service is there a market for it, what will they pay for it, things
Right.
like that. If you don't do that, if you really don't position yourself, there can be some risk. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they say, okay, there's always a safety net of your day job, as I said, while you're building the side hustle,
Right.
but at some point you got to pull the trigger. What are some of the pitfalls people should avoid in starting a business, and what kind of defensive plays can they run through?
Yeah, there's a lot. And, I like stats. I'm a numbers guy. I worked on Wall Street. It was all numbers. And, you have to be careful with stats as well, because, we need to dig in deep and figure out the why, kind of like, what are areas we can avoid. And in many cases, some, capitalization, you're undercapitalized. You start a business, big hopes and dreams, have no savings aside, and the business had legs and could do really well, but just because you couldn't get past those first couple months because you didn't have that financial cushion, that individual maybe goes out of business. They file for bankruptcy. So definitely, you need to have the money aside. Being careful who you ask advice for. This is a big one, and I personally like to ask for advice, and maybe I ask too much. Be very careful who you ask advice for, specifically owning a business. Now, you may ask what you think of a product or service and the idea itself, but if you're asking someone who's never owned a business, very different than the person that you're gonna speak with that actually owned the business, that maybe wasn't able to pay themselves the first couple months, or has been, I've been a business owner close to 20 years. There's been some good years, there's been some lean years. You want to smooth them out, and there's obviously some strategies there, and the best way to smooth things out, and kind of the way you compensate yourself. When it comes to a franchise, it's not doing the due diligence, and this kind of goes with a standalone business as well. But you just get very excited about the product or the service. I really like the service, or I really like, whether it be, in health and beauty, massages, just say, or food, a cupcake or a cookie, or whatever the food is. You get really excited about it and say, wow, I see a line out the door, I love it, I'm just going to buy the franchise. And then you find out they didn't actually do the due diligence. They found out that the numbers weren't exactly where they needed them to be, but they just got overly excited. So due diligence is key. I just recorded a 3-part series on how to do due diligence for a franchise, and you can actually incorporate a lot of that for a standalone business as well. But yeah, not knowing what you're getting into, not doing your market as well for where you are. So is there a demand? We're in New Jersey, so is there a demand in our state, for that specific service? Mm-hmm. Is the window of opportunity limited because it's cold, half the year, and half the year it's warm? So, and that's changing. It's getting warmer. It seems to be getting always warmer and warmer. But if you have a business that relies on the outdoors, is that more of a lifestyle business where you can make, a year's worth of income in 6 months, or are you limited? Maybe New Jersey isn't the best spot, and you need to open up in a different area. So lots to really consider, and not get overly excited. Talk to people in that industry that actually have experienced it. And I can't believe how many people I talk to that just completely overlooked that. I'm opening up a coffee shop. How many owners that own coffee shops have you spoken with? Zero. Well, why is that? Shouldn't you speak with them and just kind of get their input? So yeah, due diligence, do your homework, and we can spend an hour just on this topic alone.
Well, you mentioned earlier, and it's an important point, and that is capital. In that, yep. If you're doing that thing where it's a side hustle and you're keeping your day job for a while, then you have the opportunity to start saving some money and putting some money aside to live on.
Right.
So that, as you said, that business may have legs, it may be very successful, but it takes some time to get up to speed, to the point where it's making a profit, as opposed to losing money as you go through your investment and you're building it.
Right.
So if people start a business and they become too reliant too soon on that business
right.
supporting them, it can be a problem. What would you recommend to the people that still have their day jobs, that are ramping up a side hustle? How many months of living expenses should they have before they quit their day job and go full force into the side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, you want to have at least 6 months living expense. You want that buffer. Some people, if they go less, some people go more. There's no exact number, but I would say around 6 months to have the buffer. And depending on what type of business you're in, we can really spend a lot of time here. But I always tell people, it's going to take some time to open the business, to get it up and running and generating revenue. What type of business is it? Is it B2B, where you're working with government agencies or insurance companies? you have to factor in sales, and then when you're getting paid, that AR, it may take 30, 60, 90 days to get paid. So whatever you generate here in August may not get paid until the end of the year. So you need that buffer, that cushion to get you through. So, you want to make sure when you're exploring any business, get your financials in order, see what your expenses are, personal expenses, see where they can be cut, make sure those are covered. And then for the business, the benefit of a franchise is when they give you the investment, it's called the item 7 in the franchise disclosure document. It's going to give you an itemized list from a low to a high end. So two separate numbers, lists of numbers, I should say. And it's going to include 3 to 6 months working capital, 3 to 6 months marketing, 3 to 6 months, depending on the brand, that you'll need for tech and training and travel and things like that. So it's not just the franchise fee. So you'll have a rough idea what it will cost you the first half of the year.
Right. Well, we've talked about some of the pitfalls and downsides and risks and how to avoid them, but there are certainly advantages to being your own boss and having your own business. One of the things that was pointed out by the authors of the book, The Millionaire Next Door, is that only 20% of Americans are self-employed, but 2/3 of American millionaires are self-employed.
Right.
So obviously, that's a benefit right there. If you really want financial freedom, if you really want to be that millionaire next door and be very successful, then a huge part of that is whether or not you're self-employed. So with that, what are some of the freedoms of being self-employed? And say there are at least 5 of them from what you write about.
Yeah, I stole these. So full disclosure, Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. So thank you, Dan. He's written several books on these topics. So the 5 freedoms and the most popular 2 are going to be financial freedom. So what does that mean? It's being able to pay your expenses, being able to have additional funds, early retirement, being able to really do what you want when you want with the financial resources you have, and being able to take time off, vacation, have the business kind of run on its own. So financial freedom followed by time freedom. So those are really the top 2, and they kind of tie together. But a lot of times with time freedom, it's really working when you want. So for example, myself as an entrepreneur, I use Google Calendar, and the best advice I can give everyone is get rid of your to-do list, just put everything on Google Calendar and time block. And the secret to time blocking and the secret to a successful business, marriage, family, you name it, is put the personal stuff first. Work to me goes very last. I put my kids' soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, date night with my wife, or lunch, or what have you. Put all that on the calendar first. Then the calendar is opened up for anyone to schedule a call with myself. So that's time freedom for me, being able to go out and take time off and vacation. So Dan talks about those are 2 of the 5. The other 3, and really these are things we I guess overlook, is freedom of purpose and being involved in a business that maybe gives back to the community. We work with certain franchise companies that really they combat the childhood obesity epidemic, getting kids off their screens, right? I mean, whose kids aren't on their screens? I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, so I can't just see kids. So maybe they'll come up with some a brand for adults. So there's freedom of purpose. There's freedom of location. In my business, I'm here in New Jersey. I have I get to work from home. I do everything virtually. I work with people all over the country as well as Canada. So, as an entrepreneur, depending on the business you're in, you can have a remote consulting coaching business where you're, working in different time zones and, not having to travel as much as we did in the past. And then the last one is, and one that I completely overlooked. I always talked about 4 until I read Dan's books, is the freedom of getting to work with who you enjoy working with. And that's a big one. In a W-2 job, you're kind of stuck with your colleagues and your managers, and this is it, take it or leave it. As a business owner, you get to pick your vendors. You get to pick maybe not so much the clients in the very beginning, because we're learning who our ideal client avatar is and kind of figuring that out. But if there's a client or customer that's a thorn in your side and they're taking up 80% of your resources and really frustrating your office, you can fire that client. I'm not saying that to be negative, but you don't have to work with everyone that you cross paths with. So those are the 5 freedoms. Thank you, Dan. And it's something to really think about. Even if you ignore the last 3, just time and financial freedom for me. People say measure things on based off of money. How much have you made, and what's your net worth and all that, because it's easy to kind of figure out. It's a number, right? You throw it on a spreadsheet. But I don't manage my success there. I manage my success, or measure my success, excuse me, based off of, when I started my journey, I became a soccer coach and never missed one of my kids' games, or, get to go to the school events and things like that. So for me, I obviously want to make money, but I wanted to have the time freedom to spend with my family. So to me, that's truly success. It may mean something else to someone else.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of these freedoms that you describe, it's these freedoms come with being self-employed, but not always immediately.
Correct.
I mean,
Yes.
it's
Good
certainly a
point.
journey, and I think that people need to bear that in mind. And just going through some of the points you made, you can deal with the vendors you want. Well,
Right.
maybe early on you got to deal with the ones that aren't as expensive, because you're keeping an eye on your bottom line, and you're trying to keep costs low,
Mhm.
and you haven't built the business to the point where you can make more of a value proposition in your vendors, as far as, well, they may cost more, but they're better. Uh,
Good
freedom,
point. Yeah. No, that's
the
right.
income as well. That freedom of income comes when you built the business up to the point where you can make that kind of money, and you can make that kind of money by being more selective. You get to the point where you're making lots of money. All right, well, I'd rather fire this client or not do
Right.
this type of work and be happier than make that extra money.
Yeah. I'm
And
glad you brought that up. Yeah. That's very
yeah,
true.
and the freedom of time, also an important point too, because to quote yet another author, Tim Ferriss, in his book
Yeah.
4 Hour Work Week, it's sort of a catchy title and rather controversial, but what he talks about is building a business and then removing yourself from it.
Mhm.
You don't need to work. If you have a good system, if you have people in there working and doing the job, you have good systems in place, good onboarding, good training of employees, and they can run that business, and it's not solely dependent on you, then you not only have the freedom of time, but when it comes time to retire, you've got a business that is of high value,
Right.
because it's not you, it's not your name, it's not dependent on you. You can hand it to someone else and say, here's a business that runs itself, right?
That 100%. Yeah. Big fan of Tim. I haven't figured out the 4-hour work week yet, but systemization, sy- systemization is huge. It's, getting the employees empowered and trained so that you can easily scale as demand grows. You bring on, I call it almost like a lot of the brands, a barbell approach back from my investment days, where you bring on, for every additional technician, you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing on an additional salesperson, and for every 10 employees, it may mean, a manager for those individuals. So you put this hierarchy together, but the systems, the CRMs, the automations, the things that, you're up at night thinking, did I follow up with so and so? Everyone's getting a weekly email, everyone's getting a text, everyone's getting some type of follow up. We're asking for reviews and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Systemization is absolutely key, and I've definitely taken a lot of hours off my plate via just our CRM. We just signed up with a newer CRM, and that alone has saved us countless hours.
Well, yeah, having it, depending upon the industry that you're in, having
Right.
and for the listeners at home, a CRM is a customer relationship management system, and it's key to a lot of marketing and just keeping in touch with
Mhm.
customers, potential customers, things like that. And also, we talk about building something that isn't dependent upon you and is
Right.
fungible through the systems. It also, you need to build in to your business a certain unique selling proposition, so that, because if you're the same as everybody else in a competitive marketplace,
Right.
you're not necessarily going to stand out, and you're not going to be as successful. So would you say that sort of identifying that USP can be important to the success of your business?
Absolutely. What makes you stand out? So you grab you grab the attention. There's different levels of marketing, right? You're trying to grab attention, you're educating, you're building trust and authority throughout the entire process. But what is truly unique? There's a million business coaches, there's a million people that offer the same home service franchise and things like that. But what's the true standout? And I think with that, it's the customer service. I think it's the personal touch. I remember when I had my home service business, or my businesses in the past, we would say, hey, we are not perfect. Let's be very clear. But whenever there is a mistake or something does happen, we'll be the first to follow up and take care of it. And that's what's really important. You're dealing with people. No one's perfect. At least I haven't met anyone that was perfect. So mistakes will be made, things will be forgotten. So it's all about how we fix it. And I think between that and then you start getting credibility, and then that turns into referrals. Other business owners and customers will start contacting you. And I think referrals is really where it's at. Someone recommends you, you're halfway there. So absolutely, you want something unique, different angle, maybe going after a specific market because you have experience in that specific market. But yeah, you need to really stand out in the crowd.
Yeah. And continue to market to that list. And sometimes people do the well, that doesn't work for my business. And
Right.
sometimes it takes a little bit of imagination.
Mhm.
My wife and I have a restaurant, a seafood restaurant we like to go to, and we got started chatting a little bit with our waitress, who turned out to be one of the owners, about the marketing
Mhm.
and how they're kind of struggling. And I said, well, you have regulars, don't you? And she says, oh yeah. He said, so when they come in, you recognize them? Yeah. But when they walk out the door, you don't have any more contact with them. No, I said, well, have you thought about a sort of a loyalty program of giving them something that will encourage them to self-identify? You just get a name and an email address. Now you're able to communicate with them after they leave the
Right.
restaurant, maybe offer them deals, say, hey, we're having a special on this dish or whatever it is. And that can and encourage them to bring their friends. So a great referral thing. Hey, we
Yeah.
know this great seafood restaurant. You should come with us sometime, or whatever that is. So the idea of a list that we've been talking about in a CRM is applicable to a lot of different
Yeah.
businesses, and I think it's something that should be considered.
Yeah, I don't know how you run a business without it, to be honest. It's a central place to keep data. You can even I've heard we own a restaurant, but we didn't have the touch pads that kind of kept track of orders and everything. But that can download. I heard directly in the CRM. You can see who ordered what. I mean, you can get that granular if need be, and know exactly who orders what, how much of each item based off of customer, based off of day. But that email, people I've talked to people over the years, and email is dead. Social media where it's at. I don't agree with that. I
Hmm.
believe it's all there. I believe in omnipresence and being on different channels. But email is great. Not depending on what you're using it for. I think it's great just to stay in touch. As you mentioned, these are the specials for the week. Hey, by the way, did you know we do catering? We can cater your next family event. We'll even deliver for free. These are some new things we're having. We're launching a second restaurant. This is the loyalty program. If you come in, you're getting X amount of points. So
Hmm.
I think the key is attention, and just staying top of mind. Something short and sweet. It's a video, it's a short email. I think it's crucial, and I think it's a must for any business. And you could do a combination of email and text and social media, and then you really stay relevant in your market. So yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial. And there are these CRM systems out there. I'm trying to think of one that's free, but many of them are actually free, and they link right into your Gmail if you use Gmail, and your Google Calendar, and they're absolutely amazing.
Well, there are free versions. That there are freemium models of different CRMs. I know
Okay.
Mailchimp, for example, has a free level that can get you started, and as you
Okay.
learn to build your list, it can be more. But we were talking about removing yourself from the business and having a system. One of the earliest pioneers of this, of course, was Ray Kroc with McDonald's, and
Mhm.
everybody had a burger place, but he built a system where a Big Mac is a Big Mac is a Big Mac, no matter where you go, no matter what
Right.
McDonald's you're in, and it is all set out with procedures, how to cook it, how to put it together, everything else. And that it was sort of at that time. Now a lot of places are doing it, but at that time was his USP is that you know what you're going to get no matter what McDonald's you go to. Now,
Yes. Yeah.
McDonald's, I don't know whether it's a franchise or wholly corporate, but sort of a segue into franchising, which is what you do. Franchising provides a lot of that, don't they? They've already figured out a lot of this stuff. You don't have to build the systems,
Right.
because they've got them. And if you pay attention, you were talking about earlier about Section 7 of the franchise agreement, whatever, you have to have a certain amount of money for a certain amount of months for this. You have a certain amount for that.
Right.
So that also lays out for you what kind of money you're going to need to run this business, so you don't run out too short and even with a franchise fail. So how does franchising help with a lot of what we've been talking about?
Yeah. To your point, I mean, you're as a individual, the value proposition of a franchise is that system. So you pay a one-time franchise fee. It's a single investment you pay up front, and the range I've seen them, and I'm not saying there's anything higher or lower, but 10 to 50,000 is a pretty reasonable range. It's a one-time fee, and you get full access to the entire system, the operations, the marketing, the CRM, everything under that system. And that's a one-time fee. And then there are going to be ongoing royalties and some expenses for that additional support you're getting on a monthly basis. So the franchisor, with their own money, hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars, had created this system, the franchise agreement, the best ways to cook a burger, the best ways to market to the customers, the best CRMs, which vendors we should work with. And it's an evolving thing, because as the brands get larger, you have economies of scale and ways of cutting down your costs to say, okay, we sell burgers, we have 5 locations now, we have 500. We want better pricing, and we want exclusivity, or we want our own blend from certain suppliers, and that really saves money and is able to cut costs and save each franchisee that whatever that percentage is. So they've really figured out, the franchisor is figuring out what's best at that point in time, and that system evolves, right? So there may be better ways or better CRMs. Franchisees have great input. So taking a step back, if you're a potential franchisee, you're buying the system. The goal is not to reinvent the entire system and start adding menu items to the whatever the franchise is. But on the flip side, if you look at Subway, the $5 footlong was the idea of a franchisee. So they do take the input of the franchisees. I say the stronger brands take the input. That doesn't mean they're going to just implement it immediately, but they're going to look into it. There's obviously a lot of franchisees to please, and it needs to work across the system in all markets. But you're paying for, essentially, they figured out the best approach to the best ways of doing business. So you're paying that fee. Option 2, you figure it out on your own. And the argument I always make is, yes, you don't pay a franchise fee, but you are paying via mistakes and time, trial and error. What's the best CRM? All right, that didn't work. I wasted 6 months on that, or I wasted 4 months there. So maybe the dollar amount ends up being less than 50,000. Maybe it's only 5,000. But how long? What opportunity costs do we lose? And that could have been 2 years to get the business up and running. Whereas with the franchise system, something that doesn't require any brick and mortar or much equipment, we have franchise opening up in as little as 30 to 60 days, something along the lines of business coaching or executive recruitment, up and running much quicker. So you're up and running in 60 days versus having to wait 24 months. What between that time, that gap, what opportunity did you lose there? So it's a mindset shift in the way you approach this. And I always challenge everyone, think of that, think of the opportunity. And last thing I'll say on that is, some people, what they will do, and this is actually very interesting and something I learned over the years, is that they will buy a franchise and then go back to the business plan that's been sitting on their laptop for the last decade and said, wow, I've learned so much via the marketing and the CRM. I'm implementing a lot of these ideas to launch my startup. And now you have a second business based off of what you learn, not only from the franchisor and the system, but from other franchisees as they kind of put together this mastermind of franchise owners all sharing ideas and thoughts from various backgrounds. So really inspiring, and I'm seeing more and more of that.
So absolutely. So we were talking about systems, but also, how much it's going to cost. So you're right. It's not trial and error. You're not starting a business and then realizing 6 months in that there's a lot of overhead you didn't account for. You run short of money, and at least up front, hopefully, what those costs are going to be. So if you look at it and say, "There's no way I have that kind of money," well, then don't get that franchise.
Correct.
But that's better than trial and error.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now,
It's
a lot of businesses can be dependent on location. I had read once that you notice that fast food restaurants tend to be in clusters. That's because one of them does all the research on location,
Yep.
plunks down a restaurant, then everybody else is like, "Oh, that must be a good location. We'll build there," and everybody else is in there as well. Do franchise companies help you with a physical plan? In other words, where, if it is somewhat location based, where it should be located, so that there's enough foot traffic, there's enough visibility, things like that. Can franchise models help with that aspect of a business?
Yeah, that 100%. They will, when you, first off, you have to get the area approved. So depending on the business model, it'll just be number of households, something like maybe a higher end boutique type of fitness concept. We'll look at number of households with a certain income, because it's, it costs, I wouldn't say it's expensive, but maybe the average household can't afford that specific membership. So absolutely, they'll look at, a lot of people come to me with real estate that they already own, that they want to utilize. And I said, it's not that simple. You really have to figure out the brands you want, and then go back to the franchisor to approve the location. They want to make sure that there's enough distance between the other franchise owners, if any, to make sure there's enough foot traffic, regular traffic. It has to be on a corner. Some have to be standalone versus others in shopping centers. So absolutely, they'll assist there and have to basically approve that location. And then on the flip side, when you look at service-based brands that, or home service, I should say, that doesn't require a physical location, they can be running from home. They want to approve a territory, which is essentially a group of zip codes. Maybe it's a group of counties that again hits the certain demographic, or has so many households in there, like a restoration type of business where anyone's home can flood or have fire damage or mold and things like that. So they just look at total population in that area to make sure there's enough there for your business to be successful. So absolutely, that's typically we always check before the intro call to make sure that there's availability in that market. And then on the third or fourth call, they'll look at specific locations to see if that location will work.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, the franchises can help the franchisee, but of course, franchisors are in business to make money too.
Right.
And just like, management versus labor, you have franchisor versus franchisee, and there should be a healthy balance of power, for lack of a better term. When people look at these franchise agreements and they're considering franchises, are there any red flags or things that they should look for, where maybe there's a little too much overreach by the franchisor who's trying to push too much of the financial burden onto the franchisee?
Yeah, so that's a good question. When you're looking at the franchise, so you have the franchise disclosure document is the entire document, and within it is the actual agreement, the section you sign. And I always tell everyone, first off, you read that cover to cover, and hire or look into hiring a franchise attorney to really go through with comb through each of the pages to make sure there are no red flags. I am not an attorney, so but I will say this: franchises are regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. So the agreement is written so that the average person can understand it. You don't need technically a legal degree to understand the document. I have read plenty, and yes, paragraphs come up, sections come up, and I'm just like, I need a little bit more clarification there, and that's where a franchise attorney could help. You also have the ability to ask the franchisor, I need some clarification here. So things to look for. We had an attorney on not too long ago, and he said all the areas are equally important. You want to look at the financials. in the very beginning, you also want to make sure that there aren't a million lawsuits, right? Because if there are a million lawsuits, and by the way, franchisor has to disclose it, whether they went after a franchisee for non-payment or what have you, and vice versa. They all have to be disclosed. That is basically a red flag. You want to make sure that all the sections are all going to read the same from agreement to agreement, but you want to make sure that there's that comfort level and that you can easily go through it and have not just you're going to have questions. Everyone's going to have questions, but you're getting answers. So when you ask a question, if you're not getting responses, I would think that's more of the red flag. Like, why does it read this way? Or it sounds like the franchise company can compete with me. Can you elaborate or clarify? The red flag is more, is the franchisor able to, answer my questions or clarify and things like that. So if you're not getting answers to your questions or they're not clear, you ask again, and maybe it's time to move past that brand and move on and look at some another brand. So the financials are audited, so you get that. You get an item 7, which is an itemized list on the investment side, which is all great. You get an item 19, which is it talks about it's not. It used to be called an earnings claim, but it may give you an average of what the franchisees have made. It doesn't guarantee what you're going to make that year, but they may do an average. They may list a separate P&L for each franchisee. So there's a lot in there, but being comfortable, asking questions and getting answers is big. And then hiring an attorney to do a review as well for peace of mind and for clarification. Last part is that, the point of the franchise is to protect, the franchise agreement is to protect the franchise. I know a lot of people say, well, it protects the franchisor. Yes, it protects the franchisor, but it also protects the franchisees so that everyone is doing business the same. All McDonald's look and feel the same logo, same look and feel, same menu. So they want that throughout because there are going to be people throughout the US, Canada, maybe internationally. So they want that same look and feel so that each franchisee is not wearing different colors and adding different things to their menu or offering different services. So it's really to protect the brand. So because of that, they'd like to keep everything universal. So if you expect to make changes in the franchise agreement, probably not going to happen. Not to say some negotiation can't be had, maybe extending when you can open the franchise or, the moving around the territories or revising territories. And there's certain areas that maybe an addendum will come into play. But for the most part, they want to keep it so that they know every franchise is essentially being treated the same.
All right. Well, I see from your website, what you do. You have a podcast, Franchise Freedom. You have a book, and you also have a workshop. If a listener, somebody out there is thinking about getting into a franchise and starting a business that way, how can you help them? What can you bring to the table to help them increase the likelihood of success?
Yeah, I was a struggling corporate exec and was unhappy with my job. So I worked with a coach back in 2006, and in 2007 bought my first few franchises. So I can help people just kind of go through what a franchise is, answer questions and concerns. We always do a 20-minute call with anyone that calls in and books a call, and just to see if together we feel like it's a good fit. So I offer the guarantee. You learn something. Maybe I'll make you laugh. I like to joke. It's just a part of who I am. But really figuring out, is a franchise a good fit and is the timing right? Because if the franchise is a good fit and the money's not there, or you got too many personal things on your plate, maybe we talk in 6 months. But I help you get past all the noise and get clear on what a franchise is, and then what an ideal situation is, what the ideal business looks like. And that's what we really spend time on our first 2 calls, is franchising, what the ideal business looks like, and then we look into which franchises are available in your market that would be a good fit based off of, where you're located, the investment, what your skill sets are. The great part is you don't need any experience for the most part with the franchise. It's based off a skill set and what the average day looks like. Our services are free. There's never a cost. The franchise companies pay a fee, just like a real estate agent or an executive recruiter. And anyone that's interested, it's really simple. It's my name is hard to spell, so if you go, it's by my initials. So GG, thefranchiseguide.com. You can download the book. It's my exact blueprint of what I used to find my first 2 franchises. You can read that, 30 minutes, 48 pages. If you'd like to talk after, great. My workshop is more of talking about employee versus employer. And then the podcast, we're just getting a new site launch. We have about 160 episodes, and we cover every topic from franchising to career transition to the legalities, estate planning, and things like that, to the accounting. So, and we have some brands on there as well. So, any information gathering, go to the site and you could book a call, grab all the information. It's all free. And if you have a question, shoot me a message. Be more than glad to help out where I can.
Great. Well, folks that are listening, especially if you're listening on your drive to work or from work, you don't have to write this stuff down. I'll have the links and resources and everything in the show notes, so you'll know how to get in touch with Giuseppe if you want more information. And thanks for being on the show. I know I learned a lot about franchises, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Steve. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.